Welcome to Wasn't Wire. Today we're talking about Akmal's recent statement regarding the Global Aid Flotilla volunteers.
Yeah, this whole situation, all the detention and then the release of those international volunteers by Israel, including Malaysians, obviously. It's just instantly become this major political focus point back here. And the central narrative being pushed, really pushed, is that getting those volunteers back wasn't just, an outcome. It's being presented as a huge, undeniable diplomatic victory for Malaysia. We need to unpack that.
Absolutely. And to really get a sense of this claimed success, you need the background, the context of what actually happened. This wasn't some minor incident. We're talking about the Global Solidarity Flotilla. It was a pretty big deal, nearly 45 ships. Had
Yeah.
politicians, activists, aid workers, people from many different countries involved. And their goal, they were quite clear about it, was to break that naval blockade to deliver aid. And almost immediately, as soon as the detention started happening, Datuk Akmal Saleh, the UMNO youth chief, he was right out there, framing it through this lens of national strength, of political power. And for those listening who maybe aren't as familiar, the UMNO youth chief position is very visible, very influential, often a key voice reflecting the governing coalition's thinking.
That's spot on. And his claim was very direct, quite blunt, really. He basically said that Israel's decision, letting the volunteers go, sending them home, that it was a direct result of pressure, sustained, coordinated pressure from the Malaysian government, specifically mentioning Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim plus international efforts. It's presented as a clear win, a straightforward case of Malaysian political influence working.
And you have to remember, this wasn't just theoretical. There was real urgency feeding into this whole narrative. Malaysian citizens were actually detained. That wasn't just a possibility, it was happening. Early reports, October 2nd morning, said 12 Malaysians were held by the Israeli military. And maybe even more worrying, another 5 people just lost contact completely with the Sumit Nusantara Control Center.
Right. And that loss of contact, that uncertainty about those 5 individuals, well, that adds a real layer of emotion, doesn't it? Intense emotion, that anxiety back home. It wasn't just public worry, it kind of created the perfect stage for a political response. The safety of your citizens abroad. That always shoots right to the top of the priority list for any government.
Which leads us right to Akmal's strategy, his approach. He didn't really wait, did he? He jumped straight in to shape how people saw it, essentially turning this diplomatic crisis into a call for public action, almost a mandate. He was all over social media, calling for constant pressure. Keep it going, he said, across social media, traditional news, diplomatic channels everywhere.
He understood, I think, that in today's world, political wins aren't just about what happens behind closed doors. It's also about managing public perception. He needed people to feel, to believe that their voices, their collective effort was what made the difference.
And the language he used to get that unity, that mobilization, it was incredibly powerful and, frankly, quite divisive, too. We should look at this specific quote because it really says a lot about how they wanted this framed domestically. He told people point blank, ignore those Zionist micro-narratives that belittle our efforts because their souls and feelings are never the same as ours.
That choice of words, it's very deliberate political messaging. It does a few things at once. First, it kind of preemptively dismisses any criticism or skepticism here at home by linking it to some external hostile viewpoint. And second, it really works to consolidate that public feeling, right? Turning this shared cause into almost an identity thing. It builds a sort of defense against doubt.
And he built on that, really emphasizing the power of everyone sticking together. Unity. His argument was, look, maybe individually our voice may be small, but when we're united, it becomes as big as heaven and earth. Powerful enough, he said, to be shaking the world and making the enemy fear. That's quite a statement about Malaysian influence.
And this is where we hit the key question, analytically speaking. Is all that online noise, that unified domestic political feeling,
Yeah.
is that really what caused a major state like Israel to change its plans? Or is it more that the public mobilization was a useful tool, a very visible tool, yes, but one used to kind of amplify the political leverage that was already being applied through the usual diplomatic channels, the Prime Minister's office, the Foreign Ministry, the
Yeah.
behind-the-scenes work?
Yeah, it's that classic problem, isn't it? Which came first? What really caused the outcome? The politician who manages to blend that public anger with the quiet diplomacy, well, they get the credit for the whole thing. It lets people like Akmal argue that Malaysia's soft power, our united voice, isn't just noise. It's a real, measurable diplomatic tool.
Precisely. It sort of shifts the perception of what foreign influence looks like. Akmal's message suggests that success abroad is now tied directly to the domestic political will to keep shouting about the crisis. He's essentially saying that using strong, even extreme rhetoric is now a legitimate part of foreign policy leverage.
Okay, but setting aside the domestic spin for a moment, what about the actual outcome? What did the Israelis say?
Well, the Israeli Foreign Ministry did announce the result. They said the Global Solidarity Flotilla volunteers would be sent to Europe, deported. But the wording they used is really important here. They specifically called the vessels the Hamas Sumud ships.
Ah, Hamasumud, linking them together like that. It's a significant framing, isn't it? That's a very deliberate strategic move to try and delegitimize the whole mission from the start, tying it to Hamas.
Absolutely. It's part of managing the information war, you could say. By using that label, Israel tries to shift the story away from, say, humanitarian aid, which gets sympathy, towards security, towards dealing with what they frame as hostile activity. The implication is clear. These weren't just aid workers. They were connected to an enemy. That helps justify the interception, the detention, at least to certain audiences domestically and internationally.
But if that was the frame, why release them so quickly then?
Well, despite that tough labeling, they still had to deal with the diplomatic reality. You've got hundreds of international citizens detained, pressure builds. So the Israeli statement did make sure to say the passengers traveled safely and peacefully to Israel, where they will undergo the process of deportation. And they were careful to add the detainees were safe and healthy. That addresses the immediate global worry, their physical safety.
Okay, so let's pull back then. Put this supposed diplomatic victory into perspective. How big was this release, really, in the grand scheme of the whole flotilla operation?
Context is crucial, like you said. The entire Global Solidarity Flotilla operation, it involved quite a few people, 497 participants in total. Now, out of that almost 500, the number actually detained by the Israeli military before this repatriation process started was 201.
201. Okay, that number definitely gives some scale. Getting those people released, including the 12 Malaysians, yes, that undoubtedly took real diplomatic effort, likely coordinated effort. But when you look at the big picture, 201 people from many countries being let go after what was probably a combined international push, well, claiming Malaysian pressure alone shook the world starts to look a bit like, shall we say, political exaggeration.
It certainly serves a domestic political purpose. It allows the current government and Anwar's administration to show the Malaysian public that they're effective, that they can protect Malaysian interests, that they can operate successfully on the world stage, even when dealing with major powers. It basically flips a potential problem citizens detained overseas into a political win, reinforcing the government's image of competence.
It really does feel like a perfect example of how political communication works these days. You have a serious international event, Malaysian citizens involved, and boom, a prominent figure like Akmal uses it immediately to boost the government's standing and perceived effectiveness. It becomes less about carefully measuring the exact diplomatic weight pulled and more about just asserting political strength.
Which really leaves us with this lingering question, doesn't it? For us, for the public watching all this, Akmal and the government are using this event to show influence. But how do we actually measure that influence? Is this political claim just the new normal, where politicians grab any international event for quick political points? Or are these moments genuinely showing that Malaysia's influence is growing on the world stage, that it can actually impact what major powers do? It's getting harder and harder to tell the difference sometimes.
Definitely something to think about. We'd be interested to hear what you think about this, the line between political messaging and actual diplomatic results here. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.